NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring you latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, listen. I have to actually do a regular NetsBoy episode like I planned on doing. Not just I hate James Harden, I hate everything about him, and I hate the Nets right now rant like I did last time. So that's what this episode is. I'm still going to talk a little bit more about James Harden because I have to, but I'm going to try now to talk about other things regarding the Nets, like the previous games, the games coming up, and ultimately what is next for this Nets team after this disastrous James Harden trade, because the Nets don't have a team. Like, they played 9 players against the Knicks and destroyed them, really, despite what the final score was. We'll talk about that in a second. But they played 9 guys, and right now, I mean, they just don't have depth because they traded away all of their depth to get James Harden. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's dive right in. So, I wanted to talk a lot about the previous games that they had with their great wins over the 76ers, shorthanded, and the great win against comeback win against the Nuggets and those 2 bad losses. But the problem is talking a lot about those games just brings up the fact that the players I'm talking about aren't even on the team anymore, because there's a lot of Caris LeVert and Jared Allen talking points about that. So I'm just going to leave it as if like those games just didn't happen despite the great win against the 76ers and the comeback against the Nuggets. Those were great wins. It's almost like, though, that like the first 11 or 12 games that the Nets have played right now, it's 13 actually. They're 7-6. It's almost like those first 13 games just don't count. Maybe 12, I'll count the Knicks game because it was after the James Harden trade, even though he wasn't there yet. Like, it's almost like those that wasn't the Nets. That's not the Nets, right? Like, that's what I feel like. I almost feel like anything that happened before this terrible trade is irrelevant. So I'm not even going to harp too much on that. But I do want to say, because I did not have a chance to do this, I would like to wish the 4 departing Nets good luck and a NetsBoy salute to all 4 of them. We all know I always do this when a Net is no longer on the team. Rodions Kurucs, you were extremely inconsistent, but I still liked you. And, you had your moments, and I wish you the best. NetsBoy salute to you. Taurean Prince, we all know I didn't really like you that much, but you were still an adequate rotational player, and you still had moments that maybe say, this guy is worth having on the team. So good luck to you, and NetsBoy salute to you. And then the other guys, Jared Allen. I mean, this is devastating to see you go. If you remember 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago when the Nets drafted Allen, he's who I actually asked and wanted the Nets to draft. In my NetsBoy episode, I said, this Jared Allen guy, I think he's going to be a really good big in a couple years. He's athletic. He could really be a good shot blocker. I said that, and when the Nets actually drafted him, I was so happy. And, I said, this is the guy who's going to make me forget about Brook Lopez. Well, he did. Brook Lopez was one of my all-time favorite Nets, next to Vince Carter. And I was crushed when Lopez was gone, and Jared Allen helped fill that void. And now he's gone too. So a NetsBoy salute to you. I wish nothing for the best for Jared Allen. I hope he dominates. I hope he gets paid. I hope he establishes himself as one of the best bigs in the game. And same thing with Caris LeVert. Nothing but respect with Caris LeVert. When the Nets drafted Caris LeVert, I was skeptical because I knew nothing about him, because he was coming off a foot injury out of Michigan, and immediately, like all Net fans, really just fell in love with his energy and his skill set. And even though he had moments that makes you like put your hands on your heads, he was still such a great player and had all this potential. And even though he's 26, he still hasn't even come close, I feel like, to hitting that potential. So I hope the best for him. I think being at the Pacers is a great situation for him. I think he's going to thrive there. And it's just going to be upsetting to see him not be the great player. Both those guys, Allen and LeVert, not hitting their potential with the Nets. And, Nets Dog, if you remember, Caris LeVert was Nets Dog's favorite player or favorite Net. he's been depressed ever since the trade as well. I can barely get him out of his little doggy bed. He's somewhere here. I don't know who his new favorite net is going to be. Maybe one of these episodes he'll pop by and say who his favorite net is now, but he's missing Karis LeVert. So just a NetsBoy salute to all those guys. Good luck to you. Hopefully the only times you don't play well is when you're playing the Nets, but in some ways I almost hope they do play well to kind of give a giant, to the Nets and trading them. So that's that with that. Just wanted to say that because I did not wish any of those guys a thank you or good luck because I was so angry at the trade. So that's my little bit on that. So then let's focus now on this current Nets team. This team as it is. A lot of question marks surrounding this team. A lot of question marks surrounding how this team going to look with everything going on. A lot of question marks surrounding still Kyrie Irving. It sounds like he's going to be back sooner rather than later. He did get fined by the league for violating protocol. He's still dealing with whatever his personal issues are, but sounds like he's moving past that and that he's going to be joining the team soon. They thought maybe the Saturday game against the Magic, which is either later tonight or tomorrow, depending on when you've seen this episode. But now it sounds like that he's going to be forced to sit out because of safety protocols because he still needs to quarantine for a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. But it sounds like he's going to be back sooner rather than later, which is great because no one knows what the hell was going on with him. I've been keeping my mouth shut because, you know me, I'm always in Kyrie's corner. And I always just kind of said with this whole situation, let's give the guy a chance to say something before we, judge him on anything. Like, yes, he missed 5, now it's going to be 6 games. What was his reasoning? We heard a lot of speculation about, was it the Capitol Hill riots, Capitol building riots, and this and that? Was it because he was upset with the Nets? Was it, all the social injustice still that's going on? There was a lot of things we heard. I just feel like let's wait and let's give the guy a chance to say what it is before we cast judgment. So that's my personal opinion on that. But anyway, he is expected to return soon. But until then, James Harden is here. And his press conference really kind of pissed me off. Like, it really did. And he said nothing that made me feel good about him being on this team. I'm sorry. Nothing. I watched the full, 20-minute interview, basically. I saw Sean Marks' 25-minute interview after the trade. And nothing that either person said made me feel good about what's happening because they all said similar things. They all said, when you have a chance to acquire a talent like James Harden, you jump at it. Well, I still say that's wrong because sometimes there's a reason why that player is available, and I still think it's a bad idea. That's what Sean Marks is saying, and then both him and Harden saying, sacrifice. Those 3 are going to have to sacrifice. And then James Harden says, we're going to have to sacrifice. Sacrifice. But you know what I didn't like? James Harden says, we're going to have to sacrifice. Kyrie Irving has said in the past with Kevin Durant, we're going to have to sacrifice. Durant hasn't really said it as much, but we all know, we're going to have to sacrifice. We're going to have to sacrifice. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear one of those guys say, I'm going to sacrifice. Not one of them has said that. James Harden comes in as the newest player. He just said, I'm an elite player. I know my skill set. If I have to defer, I'll defer. But we all got to work together and sacrifice. No. I want to hear James Harden say, I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to come in. I'm okay with only getting 10 to 15 shots a game. I'm going to defer to Kyrie and KD. I'm going to be the one to make that move. Because when you say we need to sacrifice, you know what you really are saying? I hope he sacrifices. I hope he needs to sacrifice. No, we need to sacrifice. He's not the one sacrificing. You start expecting things from the other guy instead of just taking ownership and saying, I'm going to sacrifice. Not one of these Nets players have said that. Chris Bosh, he said that. Not publicly, but he said it to his teammates. To LeBron and D. Wade. Chris Bosh said, I'm going to be the guy to take a step back. Kevin Love with Kyrie and LeBron in Cleveland said, I'm going to be the one to take a step back. Let's go back even farther than that. Ray Allen was the guy with the Boston Celtics big three who took a step back. Let Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett be the main guys. Ray Allen took the step back. Once again, he didn't verbally say it to everyone, though it would have been nice if they did. He proved it with what, and I obviously said it to those guys. I don't see that with these three players. I don't see it. Actually, I do. The guy who's most likely to do that is Kevin Durant. And he's the last guy I want of the three to say, I'm going to take a step back. He's the only one who shouldn't say he has to take a step back, but he's probably going to be the guy to do it because I do not see James Harden or Kyrie Irving putting everything aside and being willing to take only 10 to 15 shots a game and play off the ball. I just don't see it. So I didn't like that answer by Harden. You know, I didn't like the arrogance that he had about him. He's like coming into this thinking like he's going to be like the gift to the Nets. And my whole thing is like, bro, you forced your way here. And we all know what really happened. We all know Kevin Durant was talking to James Harden over the offseason to try to recruit him, and probably Kyrie was as well. This has been in the works for months. And we know that they were talking about it. And we know that they agreed that James Harden was going to go into this offseason asking for a trade. He asked for a trade before a single game happened. Before even, workouts started, James Harden asked for a trade. You don't do that unless you know 100% that you have a plan to join that other team. And we know that's all that's happening with Sean Marks. Sean Marks talked to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, mostly Durant. And Durant said, hey, listen, I spoke to James. He wants to be here. I want him here. Go get him. And Sean Marks, he already hired Steve Nash because that's what Kevin Durant wanted. So he's like, all right, despite me saying I'm not going to mortgage the future, I'm not going to trade away all our young talent, I'm not going to blow up this team, he goes and does it because Kevin Durant wants it. And Kyrie maybe wants it as well. And once again, I hate it. I've talked about it before. This is not the Brooklyn Nets. It's the Brooklyn Kevin Durants, and that's just the way it is. But once again, he's the star player. He's the superstar, and you have to cater to him. So that's why LeBron James. Yes, I wish. That's why James Harden is here, because Durant wanted it. So that's really all it is. So when James Harden comes in and starts talking about, I'm going to bring an elite level play, I'm a versatile player. You are not a versatile player, James Harden. I've never seen you play off the ball a day in your life. Even when he's with the Oklahoma City Thunder, he had to come off the bench because he wasn't efficient enough with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. And yes, he was still a very young player at the time, but he wasn't efficient. He has never played. They proved last year Westbrook and him did not play well when they're on the court at the same time. Not even Chris Paul or James Harden played well when they're on the court at the same time. You don't play well with other players, James. So I still think it's going to be a disaster. But he said those things. It is what it is. I still would like to see what's going to happen. I might have to wait a little longer whenever Kyrie comes back, but it's going to be interesting. And then the other aspect of this all, of course, is the fact that the Nets have no depth. They have 3 open roster spots right now. 3. And their front court is just decimated. I mean, we saw in the Knicks game a pretty good rotation of 9 players. We saw great play by, Reggie Perry, who I do really like. Shaman got opportunities. He made a couple shots. Luabu Cabarro did well. So we saw some glimpses. Chioza played well. I think the biggest takeaway in the Knicks game, to me, was Reggie Perry looking like he could be an adequate player. So as of right now, I think this is Reggie Perry's, chance. With DeAndre Jordan being the starting center, which, by the way, DeAndre Jordan looked really, really good in that Knicks game. Like, best game of the year. Like, it's almost like they had to get rid of Jarrett Allen to make DeAndre Jordan remember how to play basketball. Because, he was, 4 for 4. He had 2 great dunks. He had 4 blocks, 12 rebounds. He played good. He completely outplayed Mitchell Robinson. So, I don't know. Maybe they just needed to get rid of Jarrett Allen for DeAndre Jordan to feel no competition or something. I don't know. Maybe it was because he rested the day before, and the first game of the back-to-back, he rested. Maybe that was it. I don't know, but he looked really good. And I'll tell you this right now. If DeAndre Jordan's going to play the way he played against the Knicks, I'll be okay with everything. My whole problem was that he's up to this point, after that game, he looked like complete crap. So, who knows? But Reggie Perry looks solid, and this is Perry's chance. I think one thing that people are forgetting about a little bit is Nicolas Claxton, who's still nursing a knee injury, knee surgery, and his time to return is still to be determined. Nets think very highly of him. I think very highly of him. The few games he played last year, Claxton looked really, really good. Granted, it was a very small sample size, but he looked really solid. And I think part of the reason why Sean Marks said, you know what, we can live without Jared Allen, is that he thinks in his mind, Nicolas Claxton, when he comes back, is going to become a really solid rotational big for the Nets. And I think, that's a good way to look at it. I think that Claxton will and should fit in well with this Nets team. But the problem is he's not there yet. He still has to come back from this injury. So I guess that, the Nets are going to stick Reggie Perry right now, give him the chance. He's a little undersized as a center, but he can do it. He's a good rebounder and played well as at least a backup role. I liked what I saw from him. But then they still need some guard depth. Like, Chioza played well, but you're going to count Chioza every night. Tyler Johnson's still, in quarantining because of his protocol. Kyrie, we know he's going to come back. We're not sure. The Nets just need more depth. So some players I thought the Nets might want to consider getting with those 3 extra roster spaces are the following. First and foremost, they have to almost certainly sign free agents because they can't really make any more trades. Like, they have no real assets to make any trades anymore. I mean, they have a few small assets, but I really like second-round picks and exceptions and stuff like that, but I don't expect it to happen. So some of the players, though, I think the Nets should go after, the first one that makes the most sense to me is Jamal Crawford. He was on the Nets in the restart of the bubble, had that hamstring injury after playing only 10 minutes, but he still wants to play, and I think he'd be a great fit now to come off the bench in that second unit to help with the scoring punch. Yes, we know he's 41 years old, or going to be 41 years old, but I think in a limited role, a 10 to 15-minute role off the bench, I think he could give the Nets 10 points a game and give adequate energy despite his age, and I think he wants to be on the Nets. I think that's a great player that the Nets should consider for some of their wing depth and some of the team depth that they need right now. So he's someone I would consider. I'd also consider players like Tabu Cephalosha. He's, once again, not that great of a player anymore, but he's still not a bad wing defender. He'll bring some defensive toughness that the Nets need, a perimeter defensive player. He still shoots the 3 ball. I mean, I didn't play much last year, but when he did, he was still like a 35% 3 shooter, decent defender. He could be a good fit. Kyle Korver, he's still out there. Yes, once again, older guy. He's 38 years old, but shot 37% from 3 last year. Not as good as he normally does, but a guy who can stretch the floor, another shooter that maybe the Nets can consider going after. Players like that I kind of like. Alonzo Trier, he's out there, former Knick player. He's a pretty good 3 shooter. And he's a younger guy who maybe could develop into something else. One of those guys that maybe the Knicks feel this is a route we can go. There's a lot of solid wing players out there that the Nets could go after to help bolster their backcourt and wing depth. There's the front court, on the other hand, there's really not a lot of options. Tyson Chandler, Joakim Noah. The best one I honestly saw was either Dwayne Dedmon or Tyler Zeller. Like, not a lot of help in the front court, which is more reason why I think Nicolas Claxton is going to have to be the key to the Nets in their front court and opportunities for Reggie Perry. Unless there's someone else that I'm missing, but I didn't see anything else. Maybe the Nets decide to bring back their good old friend Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and play him as a power forward center like they did a couple of years ago. He's a free agent. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure what Sean Marks is going to do. He obviously has to have a plan. He said he's not going to rush to fill these voids. But right now they're going to have 10 players for Saturday's game against the Magic with James Harden because Kyrie will still be gone. So 10 players, that's fine as long as there's no injury, no foul trouble. But even when Kyrie comes back, they're only going to be able to be dressing 11 players until Claxton comes back from injury. And, that's a bit of an issue. So Nets need to make some moves. But, we'll see what happens. I think Sean Marks is taking a step back and looking at all his options. But they need something. So that's what's going on right now with the Nets. A lot to see what's going to happen with this team, how these players are going to fit, who's going to be the forgotten player, if anyone, opportunities for players like Reggie Perry. It's going to be interesting to see. So now let's look at the next couple games for the Nets, and let's see what I think is going to happen. So let's start off first. The Magic Saturday night, once again, depending on when you're seeing this video, that's either later tonight or tomorrow. Should be a win, even without Kyrie. I'm assuming a James Harden, Kevin Durant team, even without the experience of playing together, I feel like the talent should still be there to beat the Magic. Even though the Magic are a decent team, they should still win. Then they have a nationally televised game against the Bucks. That is going to be an interesting game. Is Kyrie Irving going to be back that game? If that's the case, it's going to be a loss because there's no way Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden are going to be able to figure this out for the first time against a great Bucks team. If it's just Harden and Durant again, maybe they have a chance because once again, as of right now, Harden can be into that Kyrie Irving role that was working well for the Nets. So maybe it's kind of interesting. You think it'd be the other way around, but in my opinion, if all three of them play against the Bucks, the Nets will lose. If it's just two of them, I think the Nets have a chance to win that game. But that's going to be a great game. But right now, I'm going to say there's going to be a loss because I think that's what's going to happen because I think Kyrie will be back by then. Then they got the Cleveland Cavaliers 2 games in a row. Great. Nets get to play Jared Allen. Hopefully that won't be a Jared Allen revenge game, either of them. Nets should win both those games. And then they got the Heat back-to-back. The Heat, the defending Eastern Conference champions, but have been struggling this year. I think the Nets should be able to win the games as well. So the next 5 games, 6 games really, it's really only the Bucks game that I really feel like the Nets may lose. But once again, there's a chance they could lose all these games because who the hell knows what this team's going to look like when you drop James, the 3-step ball hog piece of crap, overweight. Ugh! When you drop James Harden into the mix, who knows what this team's going to look like. So the next 6 games, 5-1 seems very plausible. Let's just play it safe and say 4-2 the next 6 games. But, anything can happen. Part of me is excited to see what this team's going to look like. But I'm telling you right now, I am not going to hesitate to start bashing this Nets team the minute things start going south. Because we all know I'm against this trade. We all know I'm upset about it. And so, like every hater in the world, I'm actually a Net fan hater right now. Like I'm a Nets fan and I'm hating on my team a little bit. I love all the negativity that people have been saying about this trade. I'm soaking it all in because I'm a firm believer of the negativity as well, what I've seen. So call me a bad fan if you want. I'm just being honest and objective. And in some ways, like I said in my last NetsBoy episode, in some ways I almost want the Nets to fail. Almost. I really don't because I want the Nets to win. But let's just say if they do fail, I won't be upset. I won't. I'll just sit there and be like, I told you so. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to wrap up this episode. It's been a long one. Thank you guys so much for dealing with my rambling and watching my James Harden freak out. If you have not seen my James Harden freak out, check out my last NetsBoy episode. It was just an emotional roller coaster for me. I ended up losing my voice after like the first 3 minutes of the episode because I'm yelling so much. So let me know what you guys think about the interview that you heard from James Harden, some of the players you think the Nets might want to try to get to fill these last roster spots, and what you think this team's going to do and look like as a whole moving forward. And we'll see what happens with Kyrie. We'll see what happens with everything. So keep your eyes posted. The next NetsBoy. Until then, this is NetsBoy just shrugging, saying, let's see what happens, and signing off.